Lucas is a well-respected teacher at a local nursery, a keen, skilled hunter, and a loyal, supportive friend to those who know him. However, his positive reputation becomes heavily scrutinised when, after confronting a young girl at the nursery, Clara, who had kissed Lucas on the lips during playtime, he politely tells her that kissing like that is only for parents, and Clara, in an act of frustration, misconstruing the confrontation from Lucas as a form of punishment, tells the nursery manager Greta that Lucas is smelly, stupid, and has a willy. Initially seen as a juvenile remark from a very young girl, concerns arise when Clara describes Lucas's penis like a pointing rod, similar to the language used by her brother when showing her a highly explicit pornographic image on his tablet, causing deep concerns that Lucas has been exposing himself to Clara while working in the nursery. What stems from this interaction is the gradual swirling downfall of Lucas, where his career, his reputation, and even his safety are at severe risk from a community which has judged him without sufficient evidence. This is Thomas Vinterberg's Oscar-nominated drama The Hunt, starring Mads Mikkelsen as Lucas, an innocent man who falls victim to a petulant remark from a naive girl, a young girl who likely has little to no understanding of the severity of her statement, but like many children has served as a sponge for phrases and terms she shouldn't say at her age. This is demonstrated early in the film when Clara, lost on her way back home from nursery and distracted by the lines and cracks on the pavement, is escorted back home by Lucas. A clear bond of trust and friendship is apparent here, Clara even saying something amusing regarding the phrase "a kick up the arse," which she learned from her father when he tells his children to stop moping, or they'll get a kick up the arse. It's not an appropriate phrase that a child Clara's age should be using in her vocabulary, and yet, like children do, and it seems especially when regarding bad language, she has soaked up the phrase like a sponge to water and has used it in another context. This is the film establishing that this is a trait of Clara's, and so when she is shown a highly pornographic image by her older brother and he runs off shouting "Rod, Rod, Rod" to describe an erect penis, Clara now has acquired the word in her vocabulary to describe that part of the body. Therefore, when Clara talks about Lucas's rod in Greta's office while waiting for her parents to take her home as the day at nursery has ended, Greta is more aware of the implication and connotation such a word has more than Clara will be. Upon hearing of Lucas and his pointing rod, Greta has now begun to assume the worst. Is one of her teachers at the nursery sexually abusing children? From this remark, which Clara clearly does not understand the repercussions and connotations of, an innocent man's life becomes gradually and then increasingly drowned in suspicion that it negatively impacts every facet of his life: grocery shopping, his son's opportunities for a relationship with his father, his career, and his relationship with his once close friends. Greta is well-intentioned in her action, clearly aiming to put the children's safety before anything else, and even attempts to investigate matters in a way she seems appropriate, discreetly, bringing in a child psychologist before informing anybody else. But once the suspicion overflows into the community, like Pandora's box once opened, it can no longer be contained. The premise of Vinterberg's The Hunt is not dissimilar to that of Arthur Miller's classic play The Crucible, a partially fictionalized narrative focusing on the Salem witch trials, and served as an allegory for McCarthyism, a time when the United States persecuted many people for their supposed connection to communism. The Hunt and The Crucible both focus on a very similar concern: the dangers of jumping to conclusions when not all evidence is present. The Hunt is a present-day approach to this concern, as the accused Lucas becomes more vilified everywhere he goes, causing him to withdraw away from the community, with only his son Marcus and his son's godfather Brune sticking by his side, checking up on his well-being. There is a glimmer of hope to resolve this issue that escalates into multiple children claiming sexual abuse trauma at the hands of Lucas, some describing the colour of his sofa, his wallpaper, and his basement, and the parents becoming increasingly protective, understandably so, of their children when they themselves are encouraged to look for signs of trauma, headaches, nightmares, bedwetting, symptoms so general that they could relate to other conditions, and signs so commonplace in children within Clara's age group that it's highly unlikely children from the nursery would not be going through these phases of bedwetting and nightmares. The likelihood of returning to some form of normalcy decreases and decreases with each passing day for Lucas. Even when evidence begins to come forward that protects Lucas's innocence, he has no basement, and most importantly, the source of the implied allegation, Clara, admits she she was speaking foolishly and never intended to hurt Lucas like this. It would be very easy to funnel anger towards the character of Clara, but this young naive girl, likely 3 or 4 years old, would have had no prior knowledge of the damage talking about pointing rods could have to another person's reputation. As adults, we understand the connotation of such language, and that such an allegation of sexual abuse is incredibly serious. It is more concerning, however, how the community Lucas was so close to, many people he has known for decades, such as Theo, Clara's father and Lucas's best friend, both having helped and supported each other through the years. A friendship that has persevered can be so quick to exclude, accuse, and demean him. It's understandable. There is a fear that the protection of young innocents has been challenged, and that the lives of their children may be traumatized. If what is said about Lucas were true, the child abuse perpetrated by a single man would have erupted across a community. Unfortunately, as the audience, we are well aware of Lucas's innocence, and to see this man become so empty and broken is difficult. A confrontation between Lucas and Theo in the church during Christmas Mass convinces Theo of Lucas's innocence. Lucas beats him, tells Theo to look into his eyes where he can see nothing. Lucas, once a reliable member of the community, a great friend to the children he taught, and a great brother to the men of the town, is left with nothing. The film is demonstrating the extreme consequences of a dangerous allegation, not dissimilar to the claiming of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials in the Crucible, and not dissimilar to the cries of communism by the United States government, which Arthur Miller was commenting on with his play, and how easy it can be to allow the imagination to jump to horrific conclusions, assuming the worst before essential information has come forward. In the case of The Hunt, the essential information that should convince people of Lucas's innocence is that his home does not match the descriptions given by the children. It's a terrifying prospect, reflective of the English proverb, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." People don't want their children to be at risk of abuse, and yet in assuming the worst before knowing for certain what exactly happened, if anything, an innocent man had been caught in the crosshairs. While Hunt begins to conclude with optimism, Lucas and his son Marcus attend Brune's home for Marcus to receive his hunting license and his very first rifle, the stoicism of the winter morning forest settling the nerves, allowing there to be a sense of some internal peace for Lucas reflective of the peaceful woods. That is until a gunshot misses Lucas's head. The sun glare obscures the figure who shot at him, making it impossible to distinguish who took the shot, but the who is less important than the why. With the swirling suspicion of child abuse, Lucas's reputation will never be fully recovered. While some accept him back into the community after being proven innocent, some are unwilling to accept that. With a reputation tainted, never truly able to be restored to the normalcy Lucas once lived, there is bound to be people unable to accept his innocence. Once guilty, always guilty, even if never truly guilty in the first place. Like a deer in the crosshairs, Lucas will forever be somewhat a target. In conclusion, Thomas Vinterberg's The Hunt is a realistically frightening film about one man's reputation falling into a state of disrepair over an immature, juvenile remark from a young girl who was unlikely to know better. It is a difficult film to find anyone to blame here as such. Things aren't so black and white, as the parents' protective nature is understandable, and Clara herself, while in a state of petulant frustration towards Lucas, and in saying something immature, was not ever going to fully understand the weight her words could carry. The Hunt demonstrates, as does Arthur Miller's The Crucible, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The good intention being to vanquish society of child abuse, and in The Crucible's case, of witches, and yet in the eagerness to punish bad doings, an innocent life is caught within the fury. When watching Vinterberg's The Hunt, it is impossible not to consider the people wrongly incarcerated in prisons for crimes they never committed. As humans, in our attempts to right wrongs, we can make things drastically worse.